Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota was celebrating the return of one of their members. After 49 years in prison, Leonard Peltier was granted clemency and will serve the rest of his double murder sentence for his role in the deaths of 2 FBI agents in 1975 while at his home. T.R. Wheatley was at his welcome home celebration and has this report.
A grand entry and honoring nearly 50 years in the making for one man, Leonard Peltier, a well-known member of the American Indian Movement, or AIM.
Something I didn't do.
Thousands of people from all over the U.S. and Canada came to the Skydancer Event Center on the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation in North Dakota. Fabian Hurd traveled from Bemidji, Minnesota.
Well, my older sister, she was an activist. I mean, I never did understand what AIM was about until I grew older. So that's what brought me here today, welcoming Leonard home.
Even Terry Nelson from Rosal River in southern Manitoba, an AIM activist, made the trip.
Happy that he's going to end up at some point in a Sundance, which is going to, that's the spirituality of our people is still there.
For Jer Peltier, it was a chance to meet his great uncle for the first time.
This is really important for the community, but on an international level, on an international Indigenous political level, this is, a really big deal. This is, again, something that has been advocated for so long by so many people.
Peltier had hundreds of cameras on him all day long, from media to regular people and their cell phones to an entire documentary crew headed up by Jane Myers.
And I think as Native people, the way that we were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even 25 years ago, we didn't have this A game. And we didn't have filmmakers that were making films and that were behind the helm to tell our stories from our point of view.
Myers' documentary called Free Leonard Peltier aired at the Sundance Film Festival. She plans to add his return home to the film. Myers says she's in talks with 4 major companies for distribution. Because of this, Peltier was not doing interviews with news networks. Peltier went to prison for killing 2 FBI agents in 1975 on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. He and many others in Indian country maintain he was locked up based on false evidence. While he didn't get a pardon, he got clemency last month by outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden, with poor health cited as reasoning for him to serve out the remainder of his sentence on house arrest. During the homecoming, organizers reminded spectators all day long to give Peltier space for his immune system. Turtle Mountain Tribal Chairman Jamie Azure was amongst Peltier's support letters for clemency. Azure wasn't born yet when Peltier was sentenced.
Leonard Peltier's name was almost a character in a book for most of my life until this leadership position. And now it's almost like bringing characters to life and really sitting down and saying it's a real person. And he really did go through these things.
A figure that many here, including 17-year-old Kurt Fleury, only learned about in school. He's come to show support and wants to talk with his fellow tribal member.
Ask him how it felt whenever he got sentenced and how those people made him feel.
There are some, including the FBI, who believe Peltier shouldn't have been granted clemency, as well as those who believe he was complicit in the circumstances surrounding fellow AIM member Annie Mae Pictou-Aquash's murder, who say they can't support someone who condones violence on Indigenous women. But for those at his homecoming, they didn't let those concerns dampen their spirits. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Saskatchewan now, where Regina's downtown core was rocked by a fatal stabbing this week. It happened near a local outreach center that provides services for homeless people. The organization calls the tragedy heartbreaking. On February 18th, Regina police responded to a call about an injured person near Carmichael Outreach. There they found a 46-year-old male deceased. Carmichael released a statement stating safety is a top priority for all visitors. Despite the attack occurring outside their facility, they will review and enhance their safety measures. The attacker, 39-year-old Dennis Hotamani, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His next court appearance is March 6th in Regina Provincial Court. A First Nation in Quebec was celebrating on Wednesday as the federal government has partially ruled in favor of the Kebaowek First Nation in their fight to protect their ancestral lands from the risk of nuclear waste contamination. Kebaowek demanded a judiciary review in early 2024, soon after a federal regulatory body approved a low-level radioactive waste disposal facility be built near the Ottawa River. The court has ordered Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to continue consultations with the nation, saying these companies failed to uphold the United Nations Declaration of Independence in their decision-making process. Chief Lance Heyman says he's very happy with this decision. He calls it a win for First Nations across the country, as well as a win for non-Indigenous friends and neighbors who supported the cause.
With this decision and the necessity to include UNDRIP, in part of the decision making, will have a ripple effect across the country with other First Nations who you now can, take this judgment and use it as a basis to say that, UNDRIP is not something that will be applied to in the future once the Canadian government's done its work on the UNDA action plan. It should have and needs to be immediately applied in all circumstances where Indigenous rights are being impacted directly.
It's been 6 years since former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould made serious allegations of political interference. She accused Justin Trudeau and members of his office of pressuring her to stop the criminal prosecution of SNC Lavalin. At a press conference in Ottawa on Wednesday, Democracy Watch says the case is far from over and is recommending private prosecution. This despite the RCMP closing the book on its investigation in 2023 with a recommendation not to move forward on charges. Director Duff Conacher announced they are filing an application with the Ontario Court of Justice alleging obstruction of justice and breach of trust. During his remarks, Conacher alleged the RCMP were in a conflict of interest.
The RCMP should not have been investigating this matter, should not be investigating any matter involving federal cabinet ministers, because the RCMP commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the heads of every division of the RCMP are all chosen by and serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet.
Housing advocates in Whitehorse say a snapshot of people experiencing homelessness shows more needs to be done to address the issue. Called a point-in-time count, it is conducted over a 24-hour period to provide a glimpse of homelessness in any given community. The Reaching Home Community Advisory Board conducted the count in Whitehorse in October of last year. Found at least 145 people were experiencing various degrees of homelessness during a 24-hour period. The results show 83% of participants identified as Indigenous. The board says it will ramp up its work to reduce homelessness in Whitehorse, like revising its 2017 housing plan on preventing and ending homelessness. It's advocating for more supportive housing options.
Housing looks a lot different for every individual depending on what their upbringing was, how their brain works, and having support to stay in that housing and not lose it is actually a huge benefit for the rest of our community, because those people then can get back into the workforce, be productive. There's less likely that there's going to be issues of safety in our community when people are safely housed and comfortable in their spaces.
The Haida Nation in Canada signed a first-of-its-kind agreement this week. Our Truth in Politics panel is here to dig into the deal after the break. Welcome back. It's being hailed as a first of its kind agreement. Earlier this week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Haida to sign the Haida Title Lands Agreement. It acknowledges historic injustices and provides recognition of Haida Aboriginal title to lands on Haida Gwaii. It marks a significant milestone in the journey to reconciliation. For more, our Truth in Politics panel is here. Jennifer Lewitz is the CEO of Pasqua Harbor Strategies, and Niigaan Sinclair is the columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Niigaan, thanks for being with us. Niigaan, just want to say congrats on receiving the King Charles III Coronation Medal this morning, and thanks for still making time for the panel here today.
It's a little ironic to get medals honoring the king and to be an Indigenous person. I just want to, but here I am in the Governor General's house in Ottawa, and happy to be here.
Well, we'll start with you this week and talking about Haida Gwaii. And why do you suppose that outgoing Prime Minister Trudeau says Canada is recognizing or giving back Aboriginal title of Haida Gwaii to the Haida people?
During a prime minister's final days, it's pretty typical to sort of see a greatest hits. And I think this is one of Trudeau's legacy. It's one of the things that he cares about a lot. He went to Haida Gwaii with his father, Pierre Trudeau, former prime minister, as a young boy. He also, most of his career, early career as a teacher, was developed in BC, particularly out in Victoria, the Vancouver Island. I mean, this is something that he cares a lot about. He even has a Haida tattoo on his shoulder. This is a particular agreement is similar to what you saw during the creation of Nunavut. It's the recognition of Indigenous title over a particular set. And of course, if anyone doesn't know about Haida Gwaii, it's the North Island from Vancouver Island, just north. And now the Haida people, who have been struggling for almost 40 years, originally over mineral rights, logging rights, they now have title, absolute title, the recognition of their title under the Canadian Constitution, which means that they get jurisdiction, likely going to be governance in some form or another. And it could be the creation of a new territory for Canada at some point in the future, similar to how we saw Nunavut. Different than Nunavut, though, we've got one particular Indigenous nation which is recognized as having jurisdiction as opposed to many in the case of Nunavut. So this is a pretty landmark agreement and something that Trudeau cared a lot about. It will be his legacy. Reconciliation will be the legacy of Justin Trudeau, amongst a few other things. He did have some very big inroads, one of the most progressive prime ministers for First Nations, Inuit, Métis in history. So I think it's just something he cared a lot about, and it was one of his final trips as prime minister to do so.
Jennifer, what do you think about this? Good thing for the Haida Nation, Canada, and Trudeau?
I think this is obviously a good thing for them, especially when it comes to the recognition of any type of rights. Obviously, it's a little bit different for us out in Saskatchewan here, where we have the number of treaties, and our, existence with those treaties and the way that those treaties came about, especially in historical context, is quite a bit different. It's almost remarkable to see what that recognition of jurisdiction over your land looks like in modern day. I'm going to be having a conversation with my kids because I feel like we're seeing history being made right in front of us. In terms of what's good for Canada, I think immediately I go back to what is currently happening with the United States President, Donald Trump, and the conversations of undermining Canada. And, I did have a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago saying that undermining Canada is also undermining First Nations and our jurisdiction and our sovereignty. And I think this is kind of a little bit of a we're in an entirely different relationship here in this land, in Canada, with the Crown. And that needs to be acknowledged, especially when people, promote or even entertain the conversation of Canada becoming a 51st state. And for Trudeau, I echo what Niigaan said. I am obviously not a huge fan of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, but at the same time, you cannot deny the fact that he has considered the rights of Indigenous people long before it was recognized by any other prime minister, unfortunately, especially because he came in at a time where it was reaching a pivotal moment on whether or not Indigenous people were going to start being treated fairly in this country. And Bill C-92, I think, will also be a big part of the Liberal legacy. And I think that this is just furthering that conversation on sovereignty, and it's going to hand the next prime minister of our country a very, very big responsibility and obligation to start recognizing First Nations rights, not just for child welfare, not just for land rights, but in the conversation of education and justice in all different areas.
And you got in the case of Haida, why is it necessary for Canada to recognize this type of title?
So this is Aboriginal title under the Constitution, which is not a creation of another nation state. Like I think some people might wish to, or perhaps misunderstand this agreement to be even created. One of the things that the opposition Conservatives in BC were quickly to criticize about this agreement was to say, oh, well, the private landowners that are already in existence on Haida Gwaii will somehow have to leave, or their land will be turned over. My favorite response to that was Crown Relations Minister Gary Ndesangari, who said, not in any way. That's not even a part of this conversation. How this looks will go out over the next 5 to 6 years. There will be some negotiations, some shared idea of probably shared governance, something similar to what we see in BC around the co-management of natural areas. Probably would be something what this looks like. And I mentioned before Nunavut, it will be Indigenous controlled. I actually optimistically think this might be the creation of a new territory for Canada in the future, so that we won't see just 10 provinces and 3 territories, we might see 4. And I think that is an interesting and exciting and innovative approach. And it's something in which Indigenous peoples have been seeking for a very long period of time. Not always a separation to the Crown. Some First Nations want that, but to have a relationship with the Crown that is both a sanctimonious relationship, an eternal relationship, which is about sharing and co-governance, or perhaps Canada being underneath the governments of a First Nations governments. Maybe that's what it looks like.
Jennifer, do you see bigger implications from all of this?
I think the implications will obviously come from the opposition to this, like Niigaan had said, with the Conservative Party in British Columbia. I think there is obviously going to be people pushing back on the idea of this, especially because right now there's this really weird conversation that we've been having because of President Donald Trump's comments, where I feel like there's been people that have just been making comments kind of off the top of their head on entertaining the idea of Canada being a 51st state. But this now brings the conversation of who was here first and what do those rights actually look like. And Canada does have that relationship with First Nations that they not only need to acknowledge, but they need to prioritize. And I'm hoping to see that a little bit more in the coming weeks, as, you know, even I saw a news article today that Donald Trump, again, I think he's totally serious about trying to take over Canada. And I think now more than ever, we don't just need our allies, but we need our Canadian government to really be at the forefront of protecting us and our relationship.
Jennifer and Niigaan, we're going to leave it there. Of course, lots to talk about over on the Truth and Politics podcast, including funding cuts to residential school survivors, escalating violence on First Nations. But we'll leave it there for now. Thanks to you both.
Yeah, you much. Thanks.
Still to come tonight, APTN Investigates is back this week. We'll bring you a preview after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And it's a beautiful, peaceful view from Norway House Cree Nation in Manitoba. Thanks to Christopher B. Clark for sending in this photo. For the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day, you can send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at a hopefully warmer Friday forecast. Starting on the East Coast, -3 with snow in Fredericton and Halifax. Sunny and 12 below in Kuujjuaq, 8 below under sunny skies in Nain. -8 in Montreal, 12 below in Chibougamau. -4 in Sault Ste. Marie, 6 below in North Bay. -4 in Thunder Bay, snow, and -8 in Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, -10 with snow in Thompson, God's Lake, and Norway House. 9 below and flurries in Winnipeg, -4 with snow in Dauphin. -4 in Regina, cloudy, and 2 below in North Battleford. +1 with snow in Meadow Lake, 7 below with snow in the Ronge. In northern Alberta, -8 with snow in High Level, 13 below, and flurries in Fort Chipewyan. +4 in Edmonton and Medicine Hat, 7 above in Lethbridge. 9 in Vancouver, 10 in Victoria. +5 in Prince George, 4 above in Smithers. -20 in Old Crow, snow, and +1 in Whitehorse. -16 in Yellowknife, Wrigley, and Norman Wells. -21 in Sax Harbor, 25 below in Paulituck. Snow and -20 in Chesterfield, flurries and 27 below in Baker Lake. -27 with snow in Resolute, 29 below with snow in Joe Haven. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up after the news, in 2023, the RCMP closed its investigation into allegations of political interference by former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his officials. But Democracy Watch wants to reopen the case, and Duff Conacher is here to tell us why. As well, a new report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer outlines the costs of a guaranteed basic income. Senator Kim Pate joins us to talk about why Canada is long overdue to move to such a system. And finally, Pauline Frost, the chair of the new National Chiefs Children's Commission, is also here to talk about some of the work this organization has been doing. That's coming up in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Fraser. For more than 50 years, the people of Grassy Narrows have lived with the serious health effects of mercury contamination. Now, after decades of broken government promises, a new environmental threat is facing the community. This Saturday on an all-new episode of APTN Investigates, journalist Brittany Guillot takes a look at the community's fight for justice.
This past September, thousands of supporters and community members took to the streets of Toronto to protest mercury contamination in Grassy Narrows.
It needs to be addressed and the people involved need to be held accountable.
I dealt with seizures at the age 2, and I dealt with, I have constant headaches.
Our elders that are sick, a lot of them have died with mercury poisoning.
Mercury contamination has affected 3 generations over the last 50 years, and Grassy Narrows is still on its path of destruction. The grassroots movement is seeking compensation, an end to industrial activity on their homelands, and remediation. Chrissy Isaacs was born here. The mercury in her blood is a silent reminder of the legacy of contamination.
It angers me because, like in the studies, they say our life expectancy in Grassy is 50 to 60 years. I'm 44, and I feel like at this age I have to fight to live.
You can catch APTN Investigates Something in the Water this Saturday night on APTN, and we'll speak with Brittany here tomorrow. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for tonight. Creason will be back here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow with your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Fraser's up next with Nation to Nation. Have a great night.